Welcome to Inspire Campfire. I am your host, Scott Wurzbacher. Now, if you're a return listener, you might be wondering what the heck happened to the voiceover that usually precedes each episode. If this is your first time listening, well, you see, we have this awesome, very professional voice that gets every episode started. Now, here's the thing. Would you rather listen to a recording of your favorite music group or see them live? Because today we have the man behind the voice that kicks off each and every episode with us. Kevin Schoolcraft is that man. Today's episode will include stories of extraordinary adventure, Kevin's stories. And we might even find out how he got into doing voiceover. But today is really special because we're also going to talk about synchronicity, friendship, and a reminder that you just never know how a stranger can unexpectedly come into your life and radically impact its trajectory. It's also a reminder that we never know how our journey might be impacting those with whom we come into contact. So with that, Kevin Schoolcraft, welcome to the campfire.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
All right, Kevin. So before we jump in, can we have a live Kevin Schoolcraft podcast intro?
Sure. Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Oh my! I gotta applause that. I love it so much. That is so awesome. So like the conversation about how you got into voiceover, I don't even think that needs an introduction. You absolutely have a gift. And so for the listeners, Kevin, before we jump in, I just want to give everybody a little bit of quick context because you and I have known each other for about 20 years. And the way that we met was that my father and I were actually just sitting on the first tee box at a golf course in Charlotte, North Carolina, getting ready to tee off. And you walked up as a single and just joined us for a round of golf. And over those 18 holes, we just had a blast. We just immediately connected, just hit it off. You're a much better golfer than I am, but I learned a lot from you that day. But at the end of the round, it was just kind of one of those things where we exchanged contact information. I think we got together for a beer or something a couple of times afterwards. And just this friendship was born. And there's been so many things that have happened since then, and it's hysterical that now here you are on this podcast and you're the voice that kicks off every episode, and I'm just thrilled to call you friend.
Oh, that's very kind of you. You never know who you're going to meet on a golf course. It's a great place to just go sometimes as a single, and sometimes you get paired up with some crazy people and you can't get out of there fast enough, and other times you meet somebody who ends up a lifelong friend. So it's a great sport for that.
No doubt at all. So here's the funny thing. 20 years ago when you and I met, it wasn't too long before that encounter on the golf course that I had learned about this man named John Goddard. And he lived from 1924 to 2013. And when he was age 15, he wrote this list of 127 goals that he wanted to accomplish during his life. And it included these crazy things like climbing different mountains, exploring rivers on different continents, flying an airplane. And if you read the story about him, he was quoted as the real life Indiana Jones. And so around that time, I developed my own list, and I created a vision board and just kind of started coming up with a few things that I wanted to do. And then in comes Kevin Schoolcraft into my life. And one of my first experiences with you after the golf and after we kind of got to know each other a little bit was coming to one of your, I think it was a birthday party or a Halloween party, and you had the most unbelievable, authentic Indiana Jones costume. And I'm like, man, this is the real life Indiana Jones. And you've had a lifetime of not just exploration adventures, but different career adventures as well, and it's just been super super inspiring to watch. And so I'm just excited to talk about some of your life stories and your adventures that you've had, because I think you're the legacy of John Goddard.
Oh, that's funny. It's my favorite movie of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark. When I was a kid, I saw it 7 times in the movie theater. So, for that Halloween party when we decided to dress up, I'm one of those. I'm either all in 100% or not at all. So when I decided I was going to dress up like Indiana Jones, I actually somehow managed to track down the guy who made Harrison Ford's actual jacket for the movie and had him make one for me. He's a guy from London in the UK. And so that was kind of the genesis of the outfit, and it went from there. And spent way too much money making a Halloween costume, but that was one of my favorites.
It was it was so good, and so we'll have some pictures of you in the show notes that people can check out. But yeah, obviously it touched me as well, because Raiders of the Lost Ark was one of my childhood favorites as well, and Harrison Ford, and of course Han Solo and Indiana Jones are both two of my greatest idols from my childhood. Um, but Kevin, let's talk about your Goddard's list and some of the things that some of your adventures that you've done. What are a couple of the favorite adventures that you've had over the course of your life?
Well, I guess inspired by that movie. I always thought being an archaeologist had to be a really cool job. But then you find out it's really not like that. Had it been like that, I probably would have wanted to be an archaeologist. But going and seeing things, traveling to places, doing things that not many people have done, whether it's alone or with others, to kind of check off that list, really crazy stuff. Skydiving, I did that for a while, and got into climbing, and climbing has been, and hiking has been a big thing for me over the years. Cycling, I had a neighbor who got me into cycling, and that turned into riding in the French Alps while the Tour de France was there. And so I've been very fortunate and been able to do some pretty crazy stuff, and have some really good times.
You are absolutely somebody that goes all in, and the Indiana Jones costume is just kind of scratching the surface. But well, I guess let's start with the mountaineering, because what's cool about that is that, again, right around the time that you and I first started getting to know each other, and I think it was you that inspired me to climb Mount Rainier.
Mhm.
And so me and a couple of buddies went out to Mount Rainier and attempted. We didn't get to the top because there was weather, but I remember coming over to your house, and because this is something that you had done, and
Mhm.
so you'd had some pretty awesome experiences on Mount Rainier, and I think you actually trained with some pretty high profile people. I'd love to hear about that.
It was really almost kind of on a dare. I went to a wedding. I grew up in Ohio, so I had never seen a snow-capped mountain in my life. And I went to a wedding for a relative in the state of Washington, lived in Seattle. And Mount Rainier was the first snow-capped mountain I'd ever seen in my life. And a girl I was dating was with me. We went to the wedding together. And I remember standing there and seeing the mountain for the first time. And I said, wow, I would love to climb that and stand on that one day. And she actually laughed at me. And so, because she knew I had never, I grew up in Ohio, everything's flat, there were no mountains. And so that was kind of the inspiration. I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And it was about a year later where I made my first attempt. I trained for about a year, and I was going to graduate school at Ohio State at the time. And it was one of those, it was before kind of the craziness that you have now where everything's kind of sealed off, and you could actually go into Ohio Stadium back then, into the horseshoe, and run the track or run the stairs or whatever you want to do. All the students would go do it. So I would put on a 35-pound pack of concrete. I had a backpack, and I would put Quickcrete in there and put 35 pounds, and I would run every step in Ohio Stadium. And I would do that every single week, 2, 3 times a week, to try and train, because I had never climbed a mountain. I had no idea what you did. I didn't even own a backpack. So I was scared to death. And I trained for about a year and went out there the first time in 1993. And took climbing lessons in Columbus with a guy who worked at a local store called The Benchmark, and his name was Andy Politz. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it turned out he is a world-class mountaineer, and I had no idea. I just thought it was some guy who worked at this store, and
Yeah.
he was amazing, and so did lessons with him, went out there, and it was a situation where we tried to do a route up the Emmons Glacier on Mount Rainier and got to 10,000 feet. It was a week-long expedition we were doing with 75-pound packs, and ended up getting stuck in a whiteout for 3 days in the tent, and the weather was ridiculous, and I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I was gonna die. In the tent in a fetal position, curled up, listening to the avalanches rip off all over the place, wondering
Yeah.
if they're gonna come sweep you off the mountain. And interestingly, there was a young kid who was one of our guides. We had 2, 3 guides on that trip, and one of them was a young kid. I think he was 17, 18 years old, by the name of Jake Norton, who number 2 guy who would go on to be an unbelievable world-class mountaineer, and I had no idea. So I got paired up with Andy Politz to train, and then Jake Norton. And Jake Norton, one time, we left this campground at 4,500 feet, and we were going up to 60 something hundred feet. And we did that, and on the way, one of the guests, their back started to hurt, and so they couldn't go on. They had to return. So we're at 60 something hundred feet, and this guest has to be returned back to 40 something hundred feet. So Jake takes his own pack and takes this guy's pack and walks him all the way back down. At the same time, he leaves to go from 60 something hundred down to 40 something hundred. We leave to go up to 9,300,
Mm.
which is an all day kind of climb. And so we're doing this, and we get to 9,300 feet, Camp Sherman. And I kid you not, 15 minutes later, after we arrive, here comes Jake just strolling up. He had taken this guy all the way down with 2 backpacks, dropped the guy off, and come up from 4,000 feet all the way to 9,000 feet. And we only beat him by 15 minutes. I mean, this
Yeah.
kid was unbelievable. And today, if you go look him up, Jake Norton, he's an incredible mountaineer and a really great guy, and um, truly an impressive adventure guy. That kind of led to the mountain climbing because I didn't make it the first time. Went back again in 97 and tried the West Side Road route, and that turned into it actually was too nice in Seattle at that time. And the mountain had warmed up, and a giant serac had fallen down our route. So fortunately, we weren't standing on the route at the time, and
Mm.
we ended up turning around at around 11,000 feet. So it wasn't until 1999. It took me 3 attempts to finally summit Rainier, and then in between, I kind of started that path of trying to. Initially, I wanted to climb, the 7 summits, but when
Right.
you get married and you have kids, that kind of eventually falls away. And then it turned into the high point of every state in the United States. And I've done, I think, 24 of them. But again, life kind of stalls out some of that stuff. So
Hey, it ain't over, but 24 is a good start. You're one away from halfway.
what a way. Yeah. There's some funny ones. Anyone who wants to start climbing, it's a fun way to do it because, it's a goal. You can take a picture, and I sent you a bunch of those pictures. Some of them are as funny as driving up in your car in Florida and hopping out of the car and taking a picture next to the monument when you're in the highest point in Florida.
The high
And
point in
others,
Florida. Yeah, how high is the high point in Florida?
it's I can't remember the exact number. It's probably something like 300 feet. I mean, it's literally you get out of the car and you're standing next to the monument or the sign and you take a picture. And there's several in the United States like that. But then you have real mountains like Rainier and Mount Hood and Granite and some of the stuff in the Western Mountains.
Yeah, I love that. And so what was Rainier your favorite?
Probably because it was my first, and it's out of all the ones I've done, it's really the only I would call serious mountain. And you end up meeting all these people who are world class mountaineers that train on there and are guides with Rainier Mountaineering. So it's really unique. And one of my guides on the 1997 trip was a guy by the name of Tap Richards. And so I mention all these guys because in I think it was 1999, when there was an expedition on Mount Everest to find uh, Mallory and Irvine, who were the first people that perhaps summited Everest in 1924. No one knows because they were seen heading toward the summit and then never seen again. So they put together a big expedition on Everest to go try and find any evidence if those folks had ever made it or not. They were looking for maybe the camera that Irvine had, and they ended up finding George Mallory's body frozen on Mount
Oh,
Everest.
wow.
And three of the five guys that found his body were Andy Politz, Jake Norton, and Tab Richards, guys that I had climbed with. And so it just kind of crazy that you end up
Nothing
meeting
nothing but
people
the
like
best for Kevin Schoolcraft.
that. I had no idea.
That's awesome. So for those that don't know, I think the books say that Sir Edmund Hillary was the first to summit Mount Everest, but it's controversial because it could be that Mallory did. He just didn't make it back, so we don't know for sure, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So speaking of which, I just have to tell you, like, so you inspired me to go after Rainier. And then a good friend of mine, Taylor Grist, he got the bug because of my trip. And he actually went on to climb a whole bunch of other mountains, including Mount Everest. And he
Wow.
is episode 4. So episode 4, Taylor talks about his story, and I think your name is mentioned in there as as part of that circle. So it's just the synchronicities of how all of this happens, and then Derek Wood, who was episode 9, and he talks about the Pacific Crest Trail. He was tent mates with Taylor on Everest, and so it's just a cool
Wow.
thing, Kevin, because there's this synchronicity, like this chance encounter playing golf 20 years ago, kind of set this whole thing into motion, and now here we are on this podcast. It's just a pretty special thing. And so again, the point being, you just never know who you're going to come in contact with and how you're going to impact other people's lives. It's pretty cool, and I'll just publicly here thank you for that inspiration that you gave me and so many others.
It's crazy, the butterfly effect,
Totally.
something that you think is completely inconsequential, and it ends up being some important piece of history to someone, and changes. There's been a lot of people that have either climbed with me, that I kind of dragged them along these excursions, and then they've gone on to climb a lot more mountains than I ever did. I've had a couple of folks like that where they hear the story and they're like, "Oh, wow, that'd be kind of cool." And you're like, "Come on," and you get them out there, and next thing you know, they're addicted to it, and they're going on. I know a guy that, gosh, he climbed several of the 7 summits, um, and it's because you just never know. You kind of get hooked on that stuff, and it's a really fun adventure.
It is, and I totally feel you on that. So, just jump back to Mount Rainier, because it's really funny the way that you described it. You just stood there and looked at the mountain, and you said, "Wow, I want to climb that." And
Mhm.
I had the exact same experience. My wife and I saw Mount Rainier for the first time on a road trip across country when we were first out of college. I didn't climb it then, but I just the majesty of that mountain, when you're there in person, but also when you're in Seattle and you're looking back at it, it's just it creates this feeling of awe. And then we went back, and I think we did a cruise to Alaska at one point, and it left out of Seattle. So of course, we did a little day trip and went over to Mount Rainier then. And I think it was then that I was like, I'm climbing this mountain. And of course, I came back. But my question for you though is, your words were, "Wow, I want to climb that," and I want to go to that, like that feeling. Like, can you just talk more about that wow, and like what happened? Like what happens inside you when you're standing in front of a mountain like that, and what yes, it's beautiful, but what is that thing that nudges you to like actually want to climb it?
That's a great question. It was, I don't know if it's because I grew up on the East Coast or in the Midwest in Ohio, and had never seen anything like that. You see pictures of it. You might see some stuff on TV, although, way back then you didn't have high definition TV where you could really see what something looked like. It was, a grainy little black and white television. And so you stand there and you just can't believe that something like that exists if you've never seen it.
Hmm.
And the way particularly Rainier kind of floats on the horizon when you're standing in Seattle, and that it's hours and hours away, but yet it looks enormous. And there's just something, and I don't know that I could put my finger on it, what exactly it is, but it's something that it makes you go, I have got to see that. I have got to get on it. I want to see what the view is from the top of that because it has to be amazing. And I grew up kind of hunting and fishing and stuff. And the funny thing about all the hunting and fishing when I grew up as a kid is I really didn't care about the hunting part of it. I liked the outdoors part of it, hiking around and being in the woods and all that. And when you get out to the Pacific Northwest and Rainier and that area and the Cascades, it's so unbelievably beautiful that it looks like a fairy tale land. It looks like something you've seen in a book when you were a kid, and it's hard to believe that it's real. And as you get closer to the mountain and you keep getting closer and you drive and you catch glimpses of it on the road through the trees, and you just, I don't know, there's something about it. It's just this crazy pull that makes you say, I've got to do that.
The crazy pull. It is a crazy
Yeah,
pull.
it is. And and then it becomes somewhat of an obsession, particularly if you don't make it like we didn't the first two times. And it took 7 years, but I kept going back because I just got to do it. And I've known several people that have gone out there for whatever reason, weather, or they weren't in the right kind of condition, or they got hit by high altitude sickness, and they had to come back. And instead of being defeated, they're even more determined. I got to get back there and do it again.
Yeah. Is there like an element of like proving to yourself that you can, or what do you, because you went back 3 times. I mean,
Yeah, I definitely think that. And for whatever reason, I think there are certain kind of people that are drawn to sports that have some sort of physicality of suffering. And, the reality is a lot of mountaineering is suffering. And the other sport that I tend to be drawn to is cycling, and that's suffering as well. And both of those are almost kind of a lonely existence where it's step after step after step up that mountain in silence. And cycling is the same way. You're kind of seeing how far you can push your body, wanting to challenge yourself to, I can do this, one more step, one more step. And for both of those sports, I think it becomes much more of a mental grind than a physical one. I mean, certainly the physical part of it is there, but it becomes much more mentally challenging to me as you're climbing up, just thousands and thousands of the same step after step. And same with cycling up a mountain in the Alps. It's just a continual grind of suffering. And people say, why do you chase sports like that where you suffer? And I don't have a good answer. I just, it's for whatever, sick reason, I'm drawn to those. And there's certainly a greater feeling of accomplishment, I think, when you finally do achieve that. When you get to the top of that mountain and there is something to see, and you have done something that not everyone has had the chance to do, and you get to see things that not everyone has the chance to see.
can you describe that feeling of accomplishment when you get to the summit?
The funny thing is on Lake Rainier, it's less a feeling of accomplishment when you do get there because my mind is already thinking about, okay, now I got to get down
Yeah,
because the world is full of mountaineers who've summited a lot of mountains. But as Mallory and Irvine can tell you, not everyone comes back. And
right.
what's the old saying? Getting to the top is optional, getting back down is mandatory.
Yeah.
So I, instead of being elated and oh, this is the greatest thing ever, I immediately, the brain starts thinking about, okay, now we got to get down. I got to have this much energy. I got to, make sure to eat. I got to, and it becomes like this methodical thought process of getting down safely.
I mean, Kevin, like profound. You're subjecting yourself to suffering to go after this feeling of accomplishment. So the goal is to get to the top. And as soon as you get to the top, you're like, okay, done. Let's get back down safely.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and I don't know that everyone else is like that, but for me, that's what it's like. I remember one time, my younger brother Corey, who's 20 years younger than me, I got him into climbing and doing some of these high points with me. And when he was young, I can't remember how old he was, 13, 14 years old, 15 maybe. We went out to Utah to do Kings Peak, which is a really long hike in. I want to say it's probably a 20-mile hike into that summit, very remote wilderness. And we were going up, and it's a real rocky kind of traverse as you're getting near the top of the mountain. And it started snowing, and this was the middle of summer,
Mhm.
and it was a pretty hard snow. And it was one of those situations where, yeah, we're 500 feet away. We could get there, but I got a young kid with me, and what if the kid breaks an ankle? And that's what's going through my head. Instead
Sure.
of, hey, let's get the summit. It's, geez Louise, if he breaks an ankle, we're 30 miles away from anywhere on the top of a mountain and it's snowing. So we turned around 500 feet below the summit. And
Wow.
for me, it's not always about getting to the summit. It's the whole experience of putting yourself through that, and when you're 500 feet below the summit, yeah, physically I could get there at this point, but is it the smart thing to do? Is it the safe thing to do? And to me, it wasn't about checking off, the top of that summit. And it was about the whole journey of getting there and the journey of getting back safely and just, being part of it all.
It's about the journey, you just said. I love it. Because here's the thing, and I've been thinking about this actually, spending some time randomly thinking about like this concept of like peak experiences and peak performance. And the thing about a peak is when you get there, you immediately turn around and come back down.
Hmm.
So, it's not necessarily about being in peak fitness or having that peak experience all the time. It's like that becomes the goal. You go after it and then you immediately turn around and come back down. But like the joy and the fun of it is all in that feeling of accomplishment. It's all in that walk up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, part of it for me is physically, I'm kind of lazy by nature. So I need to have a goal. If I want to
Mm,
stay in shape, I need to have a goal. I need to have something that I'm training for to motivate me to get off the couch and do whatever. And then I'm that obsessive compulsive where once I have the goal, then I'm gonna kill myself training for it. But it's that process of going through that, however long a period of time you're training, whether it's 3 months or like the first time I did Rainier, where it was a year because I was so scared and I had no idea what to expect.
yeah.
That that process of going through that and that entire training um, was the satisfying part, and knowing that you did it, you committed to that training, and you accomplished getting to the point where you're ready for whatever the adventure is. Um, that to me is also part of the goal. It's not just climbing Rainier; it's training for that period of time and doing all of the things that you said you're going to do to get ready for that. And then you're kind of at the whim of the mountain, right? I mean, you've been there and the weather turns, there's nothing you can do. But you know that, look, I put in the time, I did what I had to do. I was physically and mentally ready to do this. And that to me is a big accomplishment as part of the whole challenge, not just summiting the mountain.
Yeah, so the training is actually that's I mean, that's part of the journey, and that's maybe
Hmm.
maybe we don't talk about that so much, but that's like part of why we do it because that's a
Yes.
part of the whole experience. And
Yeah, because as much suffering as there is on the mountain or on the bike when you're climbing a mountain on a bike, it's all of the prep work that went into it that was suffering too. And
yeah,
sometimes that suffering's a lot worse because you're on a trainer in the middle of a gym, just putting in mile after mile, or you're running stairs in a stadium, just looking at the same step over and over and over as you run it. There's no real satisfaction visually. It's not like you're standing on a mountain and you're suffering, but you have this great view. You're putting in the work, and that's part of the satisfaction for me, I think.
yeah, and so one thing you said that I just wanted to come back to really quick was you said, "I'm lazy by nature," and I relate because I feel that too. So, but what's
Yeah.
so interesting about it is, like, why not just be lazy? Like, if we're lazy by nature, why not we just embrace the lazy?
Oh, I don't know. That's a great question. If I could eat donuts and pizza all day and magically stay in shape, I would do it, but I can't. So I have to find something to motivate me to keep myself in shape. And if you're going to be working out every day or on the treadmill or whatever it is that you do to get in shape, if you're going to do that every day, why not at least do it for some reason?
Yeah.
So I need a reason, and that reason is I'm getting ready for a mountain, or I'm, doing a bike race or a charity ride or whatever it happens to be, that motivates you.
So climbing the mountain is not really the purpose, it's the goal, and they're two different things. The purpose really is to give yourself an excuse to go through that journey.
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. And there's so much more that you get out of it just than, standing on the top of the mountain. There's all the people that you bring along with you that, like you, that get inspired to kind of go do something fun like that yourself. And to see people's faces the first time you take them out to a place like that, and and they see it and they're like, holy cow, we're climbing that.
Yeah,
um,
it really is awesome, and we use that word on this podcast, and we actually, I've asked a number of people to talk about experiences of awe that they've had, and I just love that word. It's it's part of the word awesome, which gets thrown around so much, but if you look it up in the dictionary, dictionary says it's a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder, and I think you've described that beautifully.
Oh,
So
yeah. The fear is a big part of it. I
yeah,
mean, like, the first time I went and we were snowed in, and I was fearful because I had no idea what was going on, and you hear avalanches, it's the middle of the night, and you just don't know what's happening.
yeah,
And then there were other times, like in '97, where you're on a knife edge ridge where you have one leg on one side of the mountain and one leg on the other side of the mountain going up this knife edge, and it's 1,000-foot drop this way, and it's a 2,000-foot drop this way, and you're like, holy cow, what am I doing? You're scared to
right,
death.
right.
And you just luckily you have great guides, and they take care of you, and they, make sure that you're ready for that, and they, secure you in, and you're roped up and everything. But mentally getting yourself to put that next foot forward when you're scared to death and you're
Yeah.
like, holy cow, this could not end well.
That's a good time not to listen to the inner critic. Would you say that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because you can, there are we did one where we happened to be climbing kind of up a waterfall, as the snow was melting, and you're climbing rock, and you've got your crampons and your ice axe, and you're trying to go up, and you're roped to someone else above you and roped to someone else below you. And you're thinking, my goodness, if that person above me does something wrong, it's going to take the whole rope team off the mountain, and it's a
Right.
900-foot drop. And if you think about that too much, you become just so petrified that, at least for me, I wouldn't be able to move. I would freeze. And you just got to kind of work through that and get past
Yeah.
it and not think about it and just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, it's no joke. You got ice axes and you got crampons and, ropes and the whole nine. I mean, your focus is just present moment, one step at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I want to just pivot for a second, because one of the questions that I ask everybody on this podcast has to do about movies and actors. And so before I ask you the question, I have to stop, because, we talked about your Indiana Jones costume.
Hmm.
So you've been Harrison Ford,
I
but
have.
you've also had some other really awesome costumes. Like, some of my most favorite were, you went all out as Neo, and your wife was Trinity from The Matrix. That was an awesome
Yeah.
one.
That was a good
Love
one.
that. Charlie Sheen, The Wild Thing,
Yeah.
and
I'm a
man,
Cleveland boy.
you're and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. That was an amazing costume. And what were some of the other ones? Clint Eastwood.
Jon Snow from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Clint
So
Eastwood from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
it's another, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's what that was. The Clint Eastwood. Yeah. So you go all out with these costumes. Like, so what is it about stepping into those personas that just gets you so excited? Because I mean, I can see the passion in you, and I love how all out you go. Like, what is it about stepping into those personas?
It's just fun. Those are some of my. I always tend to gravitate toward movies I like and characters I like, and it's just kind of a fun process. And to me, if I'm gonna do it again, I'm gonna go all in.
Yeah.
And my wife's not necessarily the same way. She could care less, but sometimes I drag her along, like with Trinity. Um, But, if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it
What
100%.
what is it about those specific character? I know they're your favorites, but those are some pretty strong heroes. What is it about those characters in particular?
Oh, well, Indiana Jones, I mean, that's an easy one. That's one of my favorite movies ever, and, the whole adventure or sense of adventure, in that movie is kinda what fuels me. Some of the stuff that I do and some of the trips I go on is all part of that adventurous spirit, so I think he really encompasses that.
Yeah,
Um, Neo is just a badass,
he is a badass.
uh, Clint Eastwood, same thing. I mean, just a really, a great character, and those are great movies. Um, Wild Thing, I grew up in Cleveland, so I'm a diehard Cleveland Indians fan, unfortunately. Um, so those, that's
Loyal and
each one
committed.
has a little bit of different reason.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you're a badass, and you're an adventurer, and all of those things. And so it's cool to see all those things come together, and it's cool to see your passion in that. I can't wait to see what you're going to be for Halloween this year. So all of those different actors that you've dressed as, I'm curious because they're going to make a movie about your life someday. So Harrison Ford and Keanu Reeves and Hugh Jackman, who's going to be the actor that plays you?
Hmm. I would say Tom Cruise.
Nice, I love it. Okay, that works. I love it.
I would
So
go with
maybe
Tom Cruise. We're probably not too different in height.
or,
We
I love it. So is there maybe there's a character that you'll be for Halloween one of these years? I'll wait for that picture.
could be.
Um, Kevin, what's your movie going to be called?
I think it would be called The Renaissance Man.
Ooh, the Renaissance Man. I love it. That's awesome. Well, listen, I really, really appreciate your time and coming on the show today. I appreciate our friendship over the last 20 years. I appreciate everything that you've done to inspire me to get after adventure and helping me build my John Goddard's list. And maybe I'll start calling it the Kevin Schoolcraft list instead of the John Goddard list. But so final question is, if there's people out there that are just kind of inspired by the story and the different adventures, but they're just not really sure how to get started, and maybe they're thinking, gosh, like suffering is not for me. I don't know if I want to mountaineer, but what's your advice for people that are kind of intrigued by adventure, but maybe feeling a little bit of fear to get started?
I would say and I'm sure everyone would say it, just do it. Just find something small. Take something, if you want to start climbing some high points, find a nice easy one. Find one in your state or find a nice flat one and just kind of work your way up. Most of them are hikes. Most of them are easy. They're kind of fun to do. If you're gonna do a real kind of climb like a Rainier, get some professionals, call up some guides and you can learn a lot. You'll meet some really great people and they're really good at what they do and they can help you learn a lot of things that will make you feel much more comfortable about the experience and, take a lot of the fear out of it for you.
Love it. That is great advice. Well, Kevin, thank you. And for those listening, I hope you have been inspired today as much as I have. I hope that Kevin's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside you that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or you need a nudge to create one, please send us an email. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Kevin, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Scott. Pleasure.